Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're kicking off my October wrap up. We are a week into October and I've done some good reading. I have been on leave this week. We went to the cinema the other day. I'll mention this briefly because it is book related. Somewhat tenuously book related, as you'll see. We went to the cinema. I very rarely go to the cinema. I go like once a year because I don't really like watching films. But I wanted to see the new Kenneth Branagh Poirot film, A Haunting in Venice. And I did really enjoy it. But I don't know how they can get away with saying it's based on the Agatha Christie book, Halloween Party, because it's not. It bears no resemblance to that book other than it's set at Halloween. But anyway, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was quite scary. There were parts of the film where I was hiding behind my fingers, which tells you how much of a wimp I am because that film was like a 12A. But anyway, it was very good, although not based on a book. But anyway, my spooky season reading has got off to a great start with The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters. So I did this as a buddy read with Tiffany from Tari TBR. This is our third Sarah Waters buddy read. So this was a reread for me. This now completes my reread of all of Sarah Waters' 6 novels. I was a little bit nervous going into this because I knew it was my least favourite Sarah Waters novel, and my memory of the book was that it was kind of dull and not a lot happens. That was incorrect because a lot happens in this book and it's quite plotty. So what's it about? It's set just after the Second World War, and we follow a character called Dr. Faraday who goes to treat a patient one day at this big old house called Hundreds Hall, where the Ayres family live. So the family consists of Mrs. Ayres and her 2 sort of grown-up children, Caroline and Roderick, and a couple of servants as well. So Dr. Faraday goes to treat this patient, one of the servants, and then he sort of gets to know the family. There are lots of gothic tropes in this novel. We have a really great setting of this big old house which is sort of falling into disrepair. We've got strange goings on in the house, which is something spooky happening, or could there be another explanation? We've got the outsider trope of Dr. Faraday coming to becoming close to the family. It is so well written. There are some really creepy set pieces in the book, which I thought were really great. The one thing that for me is lacking in this book is lesbians. It is Sarah Waters' only published novel which is not overtly queer. I think her next book as well is also going to be not queer, which I think is coming out next year, maybe, hopefully. So I think it's just the fact that, obviously having read all of Sarah Waters' novels, I think she writes about queer longing so well, and so when that's not present in a book, I sort of miss that element of her writing. But nevertheless, I thought this was very good. I suspect that when I first read it, there were some aspects of the novel that probably passed me by. So it was really interesting to revisit it and spot different things. And I am already keen to reread this as well because I think I'll get more from a reread. But yeah, if you're looking for something creepy, I mean, it's not too creepy, but it is definitely creepy, gothic vibes. I would recommend it. And then I finished reading The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. So this is on the Booker shortlist, and I really enjoyed it. This is a family drama set in Ireland following the Barnes family, and the book is split into sections, so each section focuses on one of the family members. So there's the teenage daughter Cass, there's 12-year-old PJ, there's Imelda, who's the mother, and there's Dickie, who is the father. And so we follow each of them and sort of, I don't know, what's going on in their lives. There's a lot of drama in here. My favourite section was Dickie's section. I thought that was the most interesting, Also quite difficult to read at times, but I really, really love that section. Imelda's section was my least favourite. I found parts of it a little bit dull, and I also didn't like the writing style in Imelda's section because there was no punctuation, and I don't normally mind if authors want to mess around with stuff like that, but the fact that there was no full stops, it just really slowed down my reading. That annoyed me a little bit, but anyway. Overall, I really, really liked it. I thought that there was something quite interesting with the narrative voice that happens later on in the novel, which I thought was very effective. It took me about 20 pages of reading that before I clicked on to what was happening. I thought that was very, very good. There are parts of it that are quite cinematic as well. I liked the ending. There is a certain aspect of this book which is something I really, really like, and I can't say what that is because it would be a massive spoiler. But it's just something I always find very, very satisfying in a book. So yeah, it's not going to be one of my favourites of the year. However, I suspect it will probably be my favourite from this year's shortlist. I say this having only read 2 of the shortlist so far, but I thought this was very, very good. Talking about the booker, my library is getting in physical copies of If I Survive You and Western Lane, and I have put myself first in the queue for both. So that means I will be able to read the whole shortlist this year, which is exciting because I haven't been able to do that for a few years now. So I am DNFing the audio of If I Survive You by Jonathan Escoffrey because I'm just going to wait and pick up the physical copy, and hopefully those come in before the shortlist, before the winner is announced. Okay, so it's only 4 days since I last filmed an update, but in that time I have read 4 more books and DNF'd a book. So first, Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein is on the Booker Prize shortlist, and out of all the books on the long list, it was the one that I was most excited to read, so much so that I asked my library to buy a copy. And sadly, I didn't really like it. And I think the issue is that I just didn't really get it. So it's about a woman who goes to live with her brother and sort of keep house for him. She is very much an outsider to the area. It's not specified where it is, but she doesn't speak the language. She's very different to everyone around her. But it's told in this what feels like a hazy way. It's quite intangible and sort of, yeah, and I don't mind that sort of thing, but it was a bit too intangible for me to the point that I didn't really follow what was going on or understand. I don't know what I was meant to think of the book, if you see what I mean. I suspect if I reread it, I'd probably get more from it and I'd probably understand it better. So I think I can recognise this is a good book. I can see why it's on the short list, but it just wasn't quite for me, sadly. Then I read a book from my library book club, and yes, I did finish the whole thing. I didn't DNF it, and it was Prime Suspect by Lynda, Plante. So this is a crime novel. It was first published in 1991. I had never read any Lynda Plante before, but I actually quite enjoyed this. So we follow DCI Jane Tennyson, who takes over a murder investigation, and she sort of has to fight to take over this investigation because all of her colleagues, who are all men, don't want to work for a woman, basically. So there's a lot of misogyny in the book, and we follow her, you know, trying to fight that. The case itself is quite interesting. It's pacey, it's a page turner. There are certain elements of the book, I would say, that are of its time, but overall I did enjoy it, and I didn't realise until after finishing the book that the TV series Prime Suspect, which starred Helen Mirren, which I have never seen, I assumed that was based on books, the Prime Suspect books, but that's not right. So Lynda Plante wrote the screenplay for Prime Suspect, the TV show, and then after that she wrote a few Prime Suspect book. So the TV show actually came first in this instance, which I thought was quite interesting. Next, on to some spooky season reading, and this is The Haunting of Tyrese Walker by J.P. Rose. This is a YA novel about a teenager called Tyrese who's from Manchester, and he goes on holiday to Jamaica with his mother to visit some relatives there, so his grandmother and his cousin. He has recently lost his father, and so he's still trying to come to terms with that. The book is a lot about grief. While Tyrese is in Jamaica, he finds some strange things. So like he finds this like hidden grave at the side of this hill, and when he mentions it, no one like wants to talk about it. There's these sort of rumours about someone called the Shadow Man, but anytime the Shadow Man is mentioned, like everyone like shuts him up. The horror in this is really good. So there's a mixture of sort of creepy crawly horror, supernatural horror, and also sort of weird uncanny horror as well. Again, it was quite a page turner, and there is some Jamaican folklore weaved into the book as well. I thought this was a really excellent YA novel. And then still with spooky season reading, I read The Diving Pool by Yoko Ogawa. This is translated from Japanese by Stephen Snyder. So this is a collection of 3 short stories or novellas, and they're all a bit weird. So my favourite was the second story, which was called Pregnancy Diary. And in that story, it's a woman's diary whose sister is pregnant. And so the woman is recounting her sister's pregnancy in her diary. There's a lot about food. So the sister initially has a morning sickness and sort of can't eat anything, and then does get her appetite back and goes on to eat loads of stuff. But what Yoko Ogawa does really well is, I think, write about normal everyday things in a really grotesque way. And that was certainly true in that story. Each of the stories has a disturbing aspect to them where, you know, when you read it and you're like, I don't know what I think about this, I don't know what I'm meant to think about this, it's just a bit unsettling and weird. But nevertheless, I quite enjoyed it. And next, the DNF. And I didn't really, to be fair, give this one much of a chance. It's This Other Reading by Paul Harding. This is another one which is on the Booker shortlist. And I only read a few pages before deciding it wasn't really for me. There was a lot of characters introduced all at once, and the style of writing is quite a distanced sort of storytelling style. I don't really know how else to describe it, but I tend to like books which are like first person, which are quite intimately told, whereas this seems like very much sort of bird's eye telling the story. And I guess, I mean, I'm assuming this is like a biblical allegory, so I guess that's where that comes in. But also I haven't heard very many good things about the book, so my heart wasn't really in it, and there's just lots of other things that I would rather be reading. I haven't filmed any wrap up in a couple of weeks because it's been a busy 2 weeks. We are moving house, so it's been quite stressful and it's been quite busy, but I have done some reading. So I have these books to talk about. It's not the end of the month yet, we've still got a week to go. So I will have time to get more reading done, hopefully. So we'll go through these in the order that I picked them up. First is The Last Word by Taylor Adams. This is an action-packed thriller that I really enjoyed. So I really like the premise of this book. We've got a woman whose name is Emma, and she's house-sitting this house near the beach with her dog, and she is spending her time reading lots of ebooks, and she reads this one ebook that she thinks is truly awful. And so she writes an online review of it and she gives it 1 star. And then the author responds to her review and says, please can you take this down because yours is the only review online of my book and it's going to damage me, blah, blah, blah. And she thinks about it, but she says, well, no, because that's my honest review. And he's like, you better take it down. And she doesn't. So he comes after her. So it's very action-packed. It's quite over the top in some ways, but I quite like that sometimes in a thriller. There is one aspect of the plot line which is actually sort of quite moving, but overall it was a pacey, page-turning, quite fun thriller. So I would recommend that. Next is a DNF, and this is The Whistling by Rebecca Netley. So, to be fair, so I DNF'd this at about 30 or 40 pages, but this is the book I was reading at the time we found out we had to move house. So we rent this house and it's been sold, so that's why we have to move. So potentially this is not the book's fault that I DNF'd. This is sort of a gothic story about a woman who goes to live on a Scottish island to become nanny to a child, and I don't really know much more than that because I didn't get any further into the book. It was okay. There was nothing particularly wrong with it. I suspect that potentially it didn't help that I had only recently at the start of the month read The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, which is sort of a similar type of book. And so sort of subconsciously I was probably comparing the writing in this to the writing in The Little Stranger, and obviously it doesn't hold a candle to that. So yeah, I DNF'd one. Next is another DNF, The Changing Man by Tomi Oyemakinde. This is a YA novel set in a school where students go missing. I didn't read very much of it because I just didn't quite get into the writing style. It's quite, there's like lots of like text messages and emojis and things in the book, and what can I say, it's quite YA, which is what it is, so you know that's a good thing, but it was like a bit too YA for me, if you know what I mean. I felt like I wasn't the audience for that book. Then I read Foe by Iain Reid. So this was a 5-star prediction because as far as I know, Iain Reid has published 3 novels, and the other 2, which I've read, We Spread and I'm Thinking of Ending Things, I gave both of those books 5 stars. So this was a 5-star prediction, and I gave it 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. So this is about a married couple called Junior and Henrietta, and they live on a farm in quite an isolated environment. And one day this man knocks on the door to say that Junior is possibly being selected to embark on this mission. So Junior's got through to the sort of like the long listed round. Junior hasn't applied for this. He has somehow just been selected by some people as potentially being a good candidate for this mission. So obviously they're really like shocked. They don't know what's going on. They don't know whether they can trust this guy. And then quite a long period of time passes before the guy reappears again and says that Junior's been shortlisted for the mission. We know from the back that he is going to go on this mission. But at its heart, the book is about the relationship between Junior and Henrietta, and I guess the impact of this mission and potential mission on their relationship. But also I think what's really interesting is the way that the story is told, and I can't give anything away, but the way that the story is told and the plot of the story, how that shines a light on their relationship. There is a sense of unease throughout the book, and I think this is something that Iain Reid does really, really well. So obviously when Henrietta and Junior find out about this potential mission, that has a big impact on them. But as well as that, as the reader, you get this sense that there's still something just not quite right. There's something a little bit off, and I really love like reading that. And as the book goes through, obviously we do find out different things. There is one aspect of the reveal which I guessed, but I don't know whether you maybe meant to guess. There was other aspects that I didn't guess that were a surprise. I really like the ending. I'm not going to say what that is, obviously, but I just thought this was a really sort of, it's not overly creepy, but it's just very uneasy, and you definitely feel a bit of a sense of confusion as you're trying to sort of figure out what's really going on. But yeah, I loved it. And then I picked up The Hold by Hye-Young Pyun, translated from Korean by Sora Kim Russell. So this is a book I've been wanting to read for quite some time, and I didn't really like it. So it's about a man who has been in a car accident and lost his wife, and he ends up living with his mother-in-law, who's looking after him because he's had significant injuries as a result of this car accident. And we know from the book that his mother-in-law starts digging random holes in the garden, and so the man is sort of stuck in bed. He can't move really, and he sees his mother-in-law like digging these holes and wonders what's going on. Now I just found it a bit dull, really. I didn't think it was creepy. I didn't think it was thrilling, and that is how it's sort of packaged, if you like, when you look at the quotes and the blurbs and stuff. I just found it a bit boring. I didn't really feel anything on reading the book. The thing with the mother-in-law digging the holes, that doesn't even happen until quite a way through the book. So I don't know, I guess that's the hook that the book is sold on, because it's the most interesting aspect of the book, but like that's it, that is the book, that is the story. And the writing didn't do anything for me. I mean, I'm definitely an outlier on this because this has won awards, it's, very, very popular. But I just found it quite boring. So there, that's that. So there is another week of the month left. I have got, I think, I'm looking over there, 4 more books that were on my October TBR, spooky season reading list. I'm not going to read 4 in a week, but, I'm doing all right. Some of that will go into November. I do need to get rid of about half of the books in this house because we're going to be moving soon, and the house that we're moving to is a lot smaller than this house, and it's a lot more expensive, of course, but it's a nice little house. So yeah, I do need to get rid of about half my books. I mean, this is just one bookshelf behind me. We've got about like 3 other bookshelves in the house, so there is a lot I can get rid of, but I'm going to have to make some difficult decisions. Apologies if there's been not many videos from me. This is why. It's because of the move. I don't even know when this video is going to go up. Probably some point halfway through November. But yeah, speak to you when I've read some more. So it's about time I finish this October wrap up. We have now moved house, as you can tell, with a different setup. It was very stressful. I haven't been very well, and it's all sort of happened at the wrong time. I think moving house is always going to be stressful, but it was particularly stressful for a number of reasons. But we're here now, we're happy, it's all good. So I have got a few more books to tell you about that I read in October. The first is The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez, who is an Argentinian author. This is translated from the Spanish by Megan McDowell. This is a short story collection, and it's horror, a bit weird, a bit uncanny. My favourite story in the collection was called Kids Who Come Back. It's the longest story, about 50 pages long, and that one is about a woman who works archiving records of missing children. So this is children who have either ran away or been taken, and the archives that she works with are sort of forgotten about, really. They aren't live cases, no one is looking for these children. Occasionally the families of the children will come and sort of look at their records for comfort. So this woman sort of painstakingly is preserving these archives. But then these children start to reappear in mysterious circumstances. I really liked the story because it had elements of horror, like sort of your classic horror scary tropes, but also it had sort of realistic horror in terms of the social issues that were being explored within the story, and that's something that I think comes through in the whole collection in terms of the sort of classic horror elements, but also realistic horror and sort of social themes that are being portrayed. I thought this was a really, really good collection. It's one I'll probably revisit at some point because there is a lot going on in there. There's a lot to sort of get into. But yeah, very much enjoyed that. Then I read The Rats by James Herbert, and this was thoroughly enjoyable. This was so much fun. So The Rats is about killer rats. So these rats are about 2 foot tall and they will just eat you alive. So it's pretty gory, and the gore hits you in the face right from the start. Within the first couple of chapters, there is a certain scene which is like a lot. And I was like, okay, so there's no slow build up here, we're just going at it from the start. I think James Herbert does a great horror set piece. This is my second James Herbert. I read The Fog last year, which I really, really enjoyed. This is the first in a series, and as I was reading the book, I was imagining that I probably wouldn't read on in the series, because surely once you've read one book about killer rats, you've read them all. But by the time I got to the end of the book and I saw where it was going, I kind of want to read on in the series. So I'm not going to like seek out the next book, but if I happen to see it in a charity shop, I'll absolutely pick it up. I should say the book was first published in the 70s, so there is some stuff which is like outdated and inappropriate. I wouldn't say it's sort of like in your face the whole time, but it's definitely there as the backdrop, so that's just something to be mindful of. Then a non-horror book, I read Nightbloom by Peace Adzo Medie. Excuse me. So this is a book that has been sitting on my shelves for a number of months. It's a library book, and I decided I need to either read this or take it back to the library, and I'm glad I read it because I thought it was very, very good. So this is set in Ghana, following two cousins who grow up very, very close. They spend all their time together, but then for various reasons they drift apart. Part one is told from the point of view of Akorfa, and where part two is told from the point of view of Selassie. So those are the two cousins, and it's only when you read both their perspectives that you come to understand what's happened between them, and each of those two characters hasn't had a true understanding of the other's perspectives, and hasn't really understood why their relationship has sort of disintegrated the way it has. I thought that it was very good. It's a book I'd recommend quite widely. It read to me like a women's prize book. It's sort of coming of age, family drama, social issues. I think this will probably have quite a wide readership, and it's one I would recommend. And then I managed to sneak in a cheeky little DNF right at the end of the month, and that was Western Lane by Chetna Maroo. This is on the Booker Prize shortlist. I read about 20 odd pages, and it is a really short book, but I just decided it wasn't really for me. It's about a family with three daughters and a father. Their mother has died, and the father is encouraging the daughters to play squash, I think, competitively. I sort of felt like I got the vibe of the book from reading the first 20 odd pages, and decided I probably wasn't going to get an awful lot out of it. I don't know if that's fair or not, but that's what I've decided. So that was a little DNF at the end of the month. So that's all the books I read in October. I mean, I don't know when this video is going up because we're already quite a way into November. We haven't had any internet for like the first week. We have got internet now. We had no internet, we had no TV. Hence the lack of videos. Also, it's been busy and stressful. So apologies for that. Apologies for the fact this October wrap-up has probably been pretty much all over the place. But thank you for watching. I hope you're well. Let me know what you've been reading. Let me know if you've been reading any spooky books for October. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.